Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thanks for making the time to join us for this webinar. I'm Rob Ellis, an account executive here at Elastic, and I look after our education customers. So I'm really excited for today's session because we're going to be diving into Cranfield University and how they transformed their security operations utilizing Elastic and Tines. So I think a bit of housekeeping. If anybody has any questions, we can put questions in the chat and we'll be answering the questions along with the webinar, but also there'll be 10 to 15 minutes at the end of today's session just to answer the questions. So I think firstly, to help tell this story, let's do a first quick round of introductions. So I think over to you, Luke, just to introduce your role, remit, and then we'll pass on to Dave and then Carl.
Cool. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Luke Whitworth. I work at Cranfield University in Bedfordshire. I have a job title of Senior Infrastructure Specialist, which sounds much more interesting than it probably is in real life. Um, I'm responsible. I work in the network team, so I look after networks. I also look after a portion of security functionality. I lead our operational security team, as it were, which is a team made up of people from across disciplines in the wider infrastructure team. And I turn my hand to lots of other things as and when because I like to stick me oar in. So that's pretty much the long and the short of it. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Luke. Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Beach. I'm a senior solutions architect here at Elastic on our UK public sector team. So my role really is just to help our customers in central government, healthcare, and of course, higher education find some solutions to whatever problem they've got with data, with the Elastic platform, whether that's related to search, observability, or I guess more relevant to today's conversation, cybersecurity. Carl, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. So my name is Carl Dias. I am a principal solution engineer with Tines. Been with Tines about 3.5 years now. So my role in Tines is to work with people like Luke and his teams across all different customer types. So I sit with them. I listen to their automation challenges both now and down the tracks. So what's coming? And also, we talk a lot about what they're trying to achieve as an organization. So, what's the actual business outcomes they're trying to get? And then it's my role to show them how Times can help them to address those challenges and meet those needs.
Amazing. Thank you all. So I think we touched upon it. We're talking about kind of the challenges and needs. So I think the first question I'll just ask is, well, I'll go over to Dave firstly. So from what you're seeing across higher education, how is the security landscape changing, and what pressures are universities under right now?
Yeah, okay. Well, obviously, we won't speak for Cranfield. We've got Luke here to do that, but definitely hearing
Absolutely.
some common themes across universities that we do speak to. First, I don't think will come as any surprise, but there's significant financial pressure that the sector's under at the moment, and we're always going to hear that phrase about having to do more with less, and that's definitely true. I think within cybersecurity because those attackers they're not slowing down, right? I think the sad truth is the opposite is happening. There's a survey, I think, government survey last year. I think 91% or definitely over 90% of universities have reported some kind of attack or a breach, mostly phishing or impersonation attacks, which is pretty scary to hear about. But the way I kind of think about it is every organization, not just universities, need to really draw a line in the sand somewhere to say, all right, here are the risks that we kind of know about, and we've got this budget that we've got to cover them, the systems, protections, and mitigations for whatever's going on. And there might be somewhere you have to go, well, yeah, okay, we know those risks exist, but we just can't afford to do anything about it. We just have to live with it. Why that puts universities in a tough spot, I think, is that the risk surface is so large, right? The campuses are often like mini cities in their own right, and students are bringing their own devices, whether MacBooks, Chromebooks, iPads, whatever you can think of. And then also you've got the crown jewels of research systems and data that really just need to be protected. So yeah, you've got to draw that line, cover as much of that risk as possible, but the numbers really aren't kind of working to allow that to be done really well. So I mean, Luke, I'd love to get your take on that. how are you seeing that at Cranfield?
I mean, I've seen it how you're saying it, really. That is pretty much it summed up in a nutshell. It is any environment's complex, and everyone's environment's complex. So I don't think we're particularly special from anywhere. I always used to think way back that industry's problems today were our problems tomorrow. And I think that's no longer true. I think they're just the problems of the day. So there used to be that kind of comfortable feeling that, oh, who's going to really care about us when there's like, big companies they can attack and everything. And I think that kind of thinking's gone way by the wayside. So we are targets, and we've had to, firstly acknowledge that we are targets, and start to actually think and realize that we have data, as you said, research data, the kind of data that people might want to get their hands on. So what we need to do is make sure that we keep this balancing act correct and right, that we protect this data. We certainly at Cranfield, we have commercial partnerships. We do research for a large number of industry leaders. So we need to ensure that the environment is safe and practical for that work to occur and be protected. But we need to also balance it out in that, yes, students who bring their own devices can get onto our network. People who are living in the residences can have an internet connection, things like this. So there is that constant balance. And unfortunately, as you said, yeah, there's not an abundance of money floating around academia at the minute, unfortunately. So this more with less mentality, and I want to I'd take it one step further. We want to be able to do more with less, but we want to be able to do it in a repeatable way. And so I'm a great advocate of trying to capture the knowledge that a company has and make it so that things are approached in repeatable and packaged ways, so that it doesn't matter if I'm off that particular day, the same level of support and the same level of service to our end users, to our partners, is in place through that learning cycle. So, the lessons learned have been rolled back into how we do things, just so we're not shooting ourselves in the foot with stuff that we could have potentially, or we have already learned. Shoot yourself in the foot, that's fine once you can hop. Not once you've shot your other foot as well, right? Where do you go from there? It's not sustainable. So that for me is a massive thing as well, is that there's pressures and everything, and the way to do that is to try and make it so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel a lot. You're like learning the lessons once, and you then action them in a very sustainable manner.
I'm definitely going to steal that analogy of hopping and shooting people in the feet. I like that, Luke. That's
a good
really
one.
good.
That's a good one.
You can have that one for free.
I think, Carl, like obviously you're working with many different universities and stuff. What is your take on it, or is it just similar to what Dave and Luke have been talking about? Really trying to do more with less. What is your take?
Yeah, like it's absolutely that, right? And it's whilst it's not unique to universities. Universities are somewhat different than the other clients that we deal with at times, I guess. If I were to kind of compare them realistically, I think universities present a kind of a unique security challenge compared to, I guess, the corporates that we deal with. And there's a number of reasons for that. Generally speaking, universities have small teams, so small security teams looking after very large environments, very complex environments. You've got, as we've already said here, you've got faculty staff, you've got admin, you've got researchers, not to mention the thousands of students that arrive there, right? All cycling through the university every 4 or 5 years, whatever it happens to be. And as Dave said, they all have their own devices, right? They're all arriving with a laptop. They're all arriving with an iPad. They're all arriving with whatever. My own son started university this year, and we packed him off with a new laptop with Windows on it, and that was it, right? And as someone who used to be an infrastructure guy many moons ago, I was thinking they're going to have to deal with all that. But anyway, if I compare that to the rest, I guess, of our customer base that would be more corporate. Realistically, in those kind of customers, they're arriving, they're given a laptop that's a particular brand, a particular model, it's got a particular image on it. So whilst it's still not easy, it's easier, right? It's because you're not dealing with 15,000 devices of whatever brand. So that's one thing, they are outnumbered. Well, the team are outnumbered by the devices, I would say. The second thing that's different about universities, and that's worth mentioning, is there's this kind of, I call it almost a tension between openness and security, right? So by their nature, universities are places for collaboration, places for knowledge sharing. So students want to share things with other students, with their tutors, with their professors. Research, as you said, Dave, the crown jewels, they want to share with external agencies and things like that, right? So again, you can't lock it down like you can in a bank, but you have to ensure that that collaboration is enabled, but also it still has to be secure. So you can't have personal data leaking out. You can't have research data leaking out, things like that. And then the other thing that's really different, I think, in universities compared to some of our other clients would be the seasonal spikes, right? So okay, there are up and down in the corporate world, but certainly in universities, you have spikes in usage that you don't have in other places. For example, new students at the start of the year arriving, all of a sudden there's 5,000 new devices, there's requests for user IDs, there's requests for passwords, access to this, access to that. Half of them will fail when they log on the first time, as we all know. Another 2,500 tickets of can I reset my password, all of that kind of stuff. So, and again, when exams come along, that's a whole other pattern, I guess, Luke, a whole other pattern of requests and so on. So, like the team's overwhelmed at the best of times. And that's the brutal reality I find from talking to university security teams. They are overwhelmed, right? There's so much what we in Times call muck work, right? And we have a whole blog about that, which I invite everyone to go and read. But it's those kind of tasks that just the repetitive things. Take a phishing event, for example. So phishing event arrives in, that can generate hundreds of tickets, absolutely hundreds of tickets. Everything has to be triaged. There's interaction with end users. There's compromised accounts that need to be contained and so on. So all of those kind of things could and should be automated. Those repetitive things, you shouldn't be doing those every day. And because the university teams are small and they are doing those things every day, they're actually missing out on doing, the more higher value work, I guess, so the strategic security type work that they not only should be doing, but I'm pretty sure they want to be doing. That's why they joined security teams, is to do those kind of things rather than resetting passwords and containing accounts and so on. So, that's exactly where Tynes fits in here. That we will automate, and I'll let Luke talk about this shortly. We will automate that repetitive, mundane muck work, as we call it. So we use a combination of AI integrations, automations, and as much human intervention as someone like Luke wants in that process. So it's not that we're there to replace Luke and his team. We're there to, I suppose, amplify their capabilities, I would say. So it's like having another couple of team members who take care of all this stuff, and then Luke and the rest of his team can do all the other stuff, right? So, but that's completely up to Luke and his team to, I guess, design in a platform like Times. They can say how much they want to be involved in an automated process or how little. So, do we want it all automated? Do we want some of it? Or do we want just about all of it and maybe one final bit that I need to press a button on as an approver or something like that? So, a lot of the problems are the same in universities as you find outside, but there's definitely a unique thing going on in university. So I don't know, Luke, if you agree with that or if that's...
No, that sounds about right. What I'd say is certainly in the way I figure we differ is when it comes to stuff like SIEM especially. And this we found, you get your SIEM, you turn it on, and you sit there and you get alerts, and you're like, brilliant, I'm getting alerts, and you look and you look and you. The problem is because we're walking this razor of openness, it means that we see alerts that most other places in a lockdown environment you just wouldn't see, right? You're not going to see the kind of alerts that we see day in, day out. So for us, that is one of the challenges in that activity goes. I always joke with people that, if you want to test your security system, put it on a university and we'll find alerts or we'll find edge cases that you will not see probably in other places because our networks, we know we have a residence network. We have housing and student halls and stuff. So, these are people in their houses that are doing things that will light up our alerting at times. Just like this week, someone updating a game, just updating a game, and the anti-cheat component of their game fired off a load of alerts at us. So then we had to reach out, and it's fine. We got to it. We now know we can roll that knowledge back. But it's just edge cases like that in a strictly lockdown corporate thing, I'm guessing you're not going to see too often. So that's certainly a bigger thing. I think that we can easily get this level of alert fatigue or just overwhelmed by the alerts not being funny. It's just if lots of devices start doing lots of strange things, certainly in residences and stuff, we've had drivers for gaming mice try to talk to other drivers from gaming mice across. We've seen all kinds of things in over the years, but there's working through those alerts and staying on top of those alerts can become pretty tiresome, understandably. You say about seasonal spikes. We're quite lucky at Cranfield, quite lucky in that because we're wholly postgraduate, we don't see quite as much of the spike activity that undergrads do. There's always something going on our campus, but certainly I think where again we differ from certainly large corporations is that we shut down over Christmas. There is this nice week and a half where the campus just pretty much shuts. Most of our students are international; they go home, and that's it. We're off. I'm off. We're off having a jolly good time, and there's no one there to watch. The alerts, the daily alerts that are coming in, everything like that. No, the whole department is off. The same comes at end of day, and we do best efforts. We watch things, but that's very different than having people there all the time, shifts and everything like that, constantly checking. I come in the morning and I look back overnight. So I think certainly one of the more unique things for us as a university, and I don't know how other universities do it, but we're sort of that dead that time. How do we know that we're not going to walk out with everything fine at 5:30 on a Friday and come back to the buildings burning down on a Monday because massive cyber attack? And like I said, best efforts and everything like that. But that was a very big concern, and one of the concerns actually led us to once we got comfortable with our elastic solution. I think that's what led us to times. Those kind of questions, those kind of thought exercises of what ifs, and those conversations aren't fun, to be honest.
They're the things that keep you up at night, yeah, Luke. Then what ifs?
Yeah.
But I think that's a kind of a good perspective from the difference between industry and then university, but also specifically Cranfield as a postgraduate institution versus potentially your other institutions that cater to undergrads. We understand, like we were saying, the spikes, that could be from exam period, that could be from clearing. When we see clearing of students, the spikes go up. But there are some good perspectives there around the landscapes and some of the challenges faced by higher ed. I think just moving on to kind of your deployment in particular at Cranfield University. Want you to think back now, Luke. I know you've been on the books for some time, so you've been a customer with Elastic for some time, and recently now coming up to a year with Times. Can you take us back to the start? What were your main drivers or pain points that led Cranfield to adopt Elastic and Times?
Yeah, sure thing. So Elastic, it was observability of logs. Effectively, I got bored one day of logging into servers and grepping logs. That was genuinely the start of our process. I'm a bit me and my line manager, my boss and network manager. He's very, very, very good, very smart guy, but very good at extrapolating data from lots of lines of text, whereas I go snowblind after a while. So I like a graph once in a while just to keep life interesting. So when I came in and I started to work for him, one of the things early on was like, look, we've got all these logs in scattered place. Let's bring them together. And that's where we started with Elastic Open Source, way back when. And we built that out over the years. We used it for lots of things because it's very flexible. And, it was just like, yeah, let's get into Elastic. And eventually we got to a point where someone came in and said, we need a seam. Absolutely must have a seam. So that's where we sort of converted into a paying customer and made Elastic much happier because you give them money. And we started onboarding the sort of the seam component and using the pre-built rules, making sure it showed us what we wanted, feeding and tuning that, bringing in more log sources. So that's sort of the journey that we went on with Elastic and are still on with Elastic. There's still log sources we want to bring in. There's still alerts that we'd like to triage more and understand a bit more and filter down a bit. Just all that general seam upkeep and feeding that you need to do if you want it to be successful. And then we got pretty much to the point where we have this platform and we have all this information, but we were getting to the point, alerts are coming out of it. And like I say, we were starting these concerns around, well, what happens when we go home for the night? When we've got eyes on the screen, there's a team there. It's good. We're fine. The team's there. We can see the alerts as they come through. We can react if we need to react fast. That's all. But like I say, come the end of the day and we go home, we're potentially waking up to find out that there's problems that are ongoing that maybe we could have done something to nip in the bud earlier. So that's what led us to Tynes. I'd met Tynes already and I liked the platform, but I hadn't ever got quite the internal discussion pitched right. And in the end, we got it pitched right. So the things that we had seen, we could prove with the historical alerts. Look, if this had happened out of hours, that could have sat there for like 6, 7, 8 hours before getting picked up. So those kind of conversations got us to the point and that, yeah, actually, we want something more. We need just that layer of icing on top of our cake so we can really make the best use of the investment in Elastic and the information Elastic's bubbling up to us, but without us having to do all of this manually. So we approached Tynes. We had some specific requirements to get this in place before we went off on the Christmas break that year. So yeah, we've been a customer for just over a year. So it was can we get the nuts and bolts of it in place to cover us over Christmas? So that concern of, well, what if X, Y, or Z happens over Christmas? We know that we can actually sleep over Christmas and be slightly calmer about things, which worked. I'm glad to say, we hit the window. We had taken alerts, and that was the thing, because in Elastic, we had the historical data, we had the historical evidence, we had an idea of what we'd been seeing the alerts, and we knew what the stuff that was scary, the stuff that we might need action in, the stuff that we wouldn't want to leave dwell in. We knew what that was. So it was building then the logic in Tynes to, well, actually, what would we do? And I mean, the long and the short answer is for those kind of things, we'd isolate the server and deal with it in the morning. But we had that opportunity then. At the end of the day, we said we'd rather come into a server being down and deal with understanding why it went down, why the service was yanked if it was a false positive. We'll live with that rather than come in and find that hackers have been traversing through our system because they breached one system and they've been doing that unfettered. So discussions and ideas around that is kind of, like I say, how the Tynes piece evolved on top of the Elastic piece. But I think having had the history of Elastic and the confidence in what Elastic was showing us made us able to hit the ground running with Tynes. We understood what Elastic was showing us. We understood the data was bubbling up to us. This was a case of, right, so again, it comes back to that institutional knowledge. Let's try and layer our practice of what we would do and what we would want to happen into Tynes. So that is kind of where we were. Now what we're doing is we're taking sort of the next step, and typical academia, right? We're not moving swiftly because, as we've established, there's lots of time required that we don't have because we're a small team and there's other things that need to be done. But what it means is every time we go back into it, every time we see something, that it means we can go back in and tune those times stories that we've got, that we've had, to change it so that we can, okay, so this time it would have been handy to have that information in. So that's what we do. We go back and we edit the story so that the Times story goes and extracts that information straight away for us and puts it straight back into a case in Elastic. So if we're getting strange logins or anything like that, it goes off. If we get a alert from say one of our users is doing high risk logins, Times will go off to Entra directly, pull in all the like the last 10 logins, the countries they've logged in from, what devices they've got registered, what MFA methods they've got registered, and it will just what IP it will do like a who is for us on the IP address that it's saying the bad logins coming from. This is just one example, but it will then take all that information and put it straight into the case. So when someone does come along to look at it, they've got all the information they then need to make that decision. They're not having to get an alert and then go off and find all that information each and every time. So it's an iterative process then of very quickly scaling up the stories, or very quickly by academia standards as far as I'm concerned, to keep them fit for purpose, but to capture so that it goes sort of back to that, what I said at the start, that we want to try and get that conformative approach, that no matter who picks up that ticket, they get all the information that without having to know all those information sources, things like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell, our journey from where we started with Elastic right up to sort of where we are today. And we have ambitions going forward to do things like use a Times platform to automate the user contact. So with an international student base, sometimes getting alerts for someone's logged in from this country, you can't do much, but as well, people using VPN, so you get impossible travel alerts. So you get those alerts in. Now, ideally, what we do is just immediately fire off to the user with a email. Was this you? Yes, no, to a secondary email address. If they click yes, fine, we can close the case. It never has to touch an analyst size. We never have to worry too much. There's no cost from our point of view in time. And we've got an audit trace if something very bad happens. It's like, but look, we asked. If they say no, then we can actually jump straight on that. We've got a much more confident start off point to research it, to understand, because we know full well that it isn't a false positive. So it's things like that that either we're doing or it's allowed us to start discussions around that, because we've got a large pool of data from lots of sources, and now we've got a way to automatically enhance that data or triage it. So that's kind of where we're at.
It's funny, just a couple of things that you mentioned there, Luke, and it's funny. People come to Times and they always want to talk about automation, and they always, I have this process, whether it's big, small, they always want to automate it. But actually, you touched on something really important there, and I always bring it up whenever I am demonstrating the platform and maybe showing the case management in the platform. It's the consistency that's really important. So yes, you can automate it, but every time that workflow runs, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to output the same information in the same format. So exactly as you just said, one of the analysts can go in and they know exactly what to expect when they get in there. So that consistency is really important. The other thing that was interesting that you said as well, not that the rest of it wasn't, right? But one thing that jumped out as well is that little example you gave at the end of someone logging on, it fires them a quick email. Did you do this? Click on this or this. A relatively short, in fact, a very short workflow in Times. And again, that's another thing that I find. People will come looking for automation for, I have this big phishing process. I have this big incident response process. And absolutely, they are good use cases for Times. But what tends to happen then is they realize that they have these other small little things, like you just said, that are, okay, they're a 5-minute job ordinarily, but they're doing them 20 times a day. So actually, if you start automating those small things as well, the time savings are immense when they all build up. So it's it's important to think about automation in that way as well. Not the big stuff only, but the big stuff and the small stuff.
I also think there's a very big factor of demonstrating operational maturity in the event of anything happens where hypothetically, if you had a breach that you had to report to the relevant bodies, it's a good way of when they come and say, right, so what have you been doing? As we know, so things like fines from the ICO are very much dependent on what you as an organization have done. If you've done absolutely everything you can and you've still got breached, you're not going to get fined as heavily as if you've just been very laissez-faire and done nothing and then you've got breached. So for me, a lot of this is around personally, and I put on my operational security lead hat, is trying to capture the good practices we've got going on into a way that should anything happen where we have to be assessed or audited by externals, and they come in and say, right, what do you do? Well, here's what we do. Here's it doing it. Here's the logs of it doing it. There, it starts to you go through those stages a bit quicker post breach, and it also means that you can hopefully like climb down off the ceiling a little bit should a breach occur, because it's like, look, I can demonstrate I've done everything, and everything is against the backdrop, as we've already discussed, of reduced budgets and lower headcounts. Those factors are factors, but they're not excuses if you've just lost millions of pieces of personal data. So for me, it's as you get further down, and as we all have to get further down this sort of maturity cycle of how we approach these security operations. For me, that's also a big one, is capturing precisely the workflows and showing that they're being run when you say they're going to run, not just, oh yeah, we do it, but we do it when we have time. No, they're done. They're done on a schedule. They're done in the same way every time, and you get, which we've said, and so you get those boxes ticked should a breach occur, and you can move past that side of things. You can supply the documentation and get past that side of the governance part of it a bit quicker and hopefully a bit more successfully, which means that hopefully should the worst happen and you do stare down the barrel of a fine or anything like that, it's going to be considerably lesser because you've got this weight of evidence that, look, you really are trying as hard as you can. So that for me is personally quite a bit. Again, we go back to things that keep you awake at night, right? That's one that hopefully will help me sleep a bit more at some point down the line, if you get me. That one's yeah, just yeah, like I say, something that I think is very useful that isn't pointed out a great deal.
There's a lot to there of what, where you've come from, where you're potentially going, and there's a lot there. Dave, do you have any questions or any follow-ups to that or any thoughts?
Well, no, I think the only follow-up was about the deployment itself. So, Luke, you said you ran Elastic Self-Managed for a while, then you migrated late to Elastic Cloud, and now running Tines alongside. Was that quite an intentional plan to end up with cloud and SaaS solutions? Is that part of a wider strategy you've got at the university, or just your
So
own plan?
yeah, no, in the infrastructure team, we are a cloud first where it makes sense.
Yeah, it's very sensible.
People. So we started hosting Elastic on site on the open source and on tin. When we obviously it's not a small footprint to run Elastic on-prem. No matter if you want to ingest data, considerable amounts of data, it's never going to be a small footprint in terms of servers, resiliency, and then the time to manage and to upgrade and all those good things, which, people like me quite like, because we like tinkering with big boxes, and, it's a happy day when you get a big server that you can put in a rack and see how fast it goes and it's got flashy lights, live for that. But there comes a point where you don't want to be well, if you're doing that, you're not doing other things. And we come back to that sort of those strategy aspirations of, if I'm not curating and petting and feeding my servers, then I have time to think more about what else can we be doing security wise, or actually using the platforms. It's one thing to get a SIEM in place. It's another thing to actually use it and demonstratively use it for good. So yeah, it was when it became time to move away from the open source, it was a question of on-prem or cloud. We went with cloud. for all the usual cloudy reasons, scalability, resiliency, someone else's problem to keep it all up to date, those kind of things. And we've rolled forward with it on that. We haven't looked back on that one, if I'm entirely honest. Um, it is just what it is. It's there. We work with it. Same with Tynes. Tynes is a cloud platform. Tynes talks to all other cloud platforms that we want to quite natively. So it doesn't make a great deal of sense. There is very little sense to run these things personally, I think, in-house unless you really like flashy lights and boxes and fan noise in your server rooms. Where it makes sense, like I say, and in this instance, it very much does. So yeah, and it's working for us.
Were there any challenges, any specific challenges to deploying Elastic or Tines of making that transition? And
No,
how did you mitigate that, or
so sorry, I didn't even let you finish your question.
no, no, no,
Um,
you're
there,
good.
there were no challenges in terms because we'd used Elastic.
Yeah.
It was it's something we were already comfortable with running somewhere else. And we drained because we only at that point kept a couple of weeks of data because we were using it for nearline analysis, right? So we didn't keep huge up. All we did was drained out one as we filled up the other. So you just kind of hopped over. That was we just pointed most of our ingesters to a new address. Brilliant, right? So that worked lovely. Tynes, as I said, we did kind of race through the right. We've decided we want it, so let's get going with it, kind of thing. And we had our tenant, we had our canvas, we started to drop the things on. There's we did some of the training for both of your products early doors to make sure that I'm a tinkerer, so I don't like reading about how to do something. I'd much rather really just kick the tires and have a play myself and all of that. But occasionally you do want to make sure you're actually doing it right and not just gone off on whimsy. So you both had training that we took advantage of. That made sure that our gut instincts were right and that we were going in the correct path, obviously, because why wouldn't we be, And that allowed, yeah, and we just got on with things. And both of you had support so that if we did get stuck, we could reach out to someone and get an answer. And yeah, you guys from your side in both your cases got us working and got us to achieving the goals we needed to achieve when we want to achieve them. So, hats off to you guys on that. Obviously, it was us implementing it that did it all, but you guys, just in case my
Credit where
boss ever
credit's due.
watches this. Yeah, I'm very benevolent, right? But yeah, so in terms of there was no pain points. Um, there's not been any ongoing pain points, particularly outside of any other software engagement we've ever had. No one's perfect, but this is real life. We're not living in fantasy land, and yeah, we're still here now. We're still using your products. We haven't run at the first possible opportunity. So read into that what you will.
I think you've touched on how your day-to-day operations have kind of changed for your security and your SOC teams. Can you share any real-world kind of examples of where you've been able to detect and remediate any threats using Elastic and Tines? Anything
So
that you can share, obviously.
yeah, so the ones I can share are more around, I'd say the where we have learned things. So where we've come in and we've seen that someone's had a stab at, say, a server. Certainly like someone's tried to inject a web shell or something into a server. And so we see the alerts for that, but we're like, that where we see dicey activity that we wouldn't be comfortable finding out about multiple hours later. We have put in things so that if you see this specific alert, you see that specific alert, just came off the server for now. Just kill it off and we'll deal with it in the morning. So it's allowed us to where we've like I say, where we've seen alerts and stuff in the past that it's great we were there, we could investigate it quickly to get to the truth of the matter and everything like that. It's allowed us to put in the conditions so that we can be more comfortable about leaving them or just shutting down the service. What it's also allowed us to do, as I said, is to make it so that when we have to look at alerts and stuff, we are not coming at it at a blank slate each and every time. And that's the pretty significant thing, that we are, as far where we are along the maturity of all of this, we've got now controls and measures in place should bad things happen that we hope will save us. But what we've also got now is iteratively, and every time we touch it, it's getting better. Information in cases, much faster resolution of those cases, and much hopefully less fatigue when looking at those cases. I've been working through a load of cases today just to look at, right, it's time to take stock of what else we can add into those cases automatically, what extra info we can get in. So there's the elements of that. I've kind of touched on the user driven side of it a bit more. That's the next ambition, which we haven't been able to do up until now. Like I say, it's taken us a while to get through all these things, unfortunately. So we could have done this a year ago, but we're getting through to it now. Don't judge me on that one. But what it is we've also been able to do just, and it comes back to kind of what Carl says, we found some of the littler things, just little things that we have to do, that we have to follow processes. Like anyone in academia who's on this call will probably, and has a student residences, will probably once in a while get copyright infringement notices. Obviously wrong, because none of our students would ever download a pirated movie, and if they did, it was complete accident. But we've got a workflow now that when one of those come in, we just email it straight across to that, and it goes off and it logs the right ticket. It steps it through, it breaks apart the XML that comes in. It's just a process that someone was having to do day in, day out. Well, not day in, day out, when they came in. Typically, since I wrote that, not had one, which is just not fair, really, when you spend the time writing this lovely little playbook. We've also done things around short-term account accesses. So we've now got a story that's literally just gone live in the last couple of weeks for a certain subset of users, that their accounts stayed locked and dormant until they go through a certain process in Tines that's using one of their pages. It kind of drops them into like a web application that's built in Tines, that they go through the hoops, and it involves emailing back to the registered email address of that, which will then unlock the account for a certain amount of time for them to do the necessary. And then at the end of that time, it will close the account off again. All that work and all that interaction through that story gets piped back into Elastic. So Elastic is actually logging all of that for all those accounts and everything like that. That's something that would have been either a very bespoke custom coding. I did it. I dragged and dropped and built the whole thing, touched Azure, touched on-prem AD, like I say, logged straight out to Elastic. And all of this was just done using the Tines interface. But it's fixed a pain point for people around those accounts while maintaining security practices, or at least putting in sensible compensated controls with the time limits and the way that these accounts are re-upped. And it's, yeah, like I say, it's there for auditing. Audit tickets get automatically generated in our ticketing system, so that there's a view for that as well. Those kind of capabilities and that kind of really rich audit trail and low cost in terms of going forwards of that process is where, it's magic sauce, really. When I can go to people and say, look, it's this, and I can show them it in a way they understand, because it's just, follow the lines. It's brilliant. That's really useful. And as more and more of those things get built, it becomes the art of the possible then a bit more, where people know they get these alerts, or where people who run systems know that X plus Y equals good or bad, or something they need to know about, or something they want to do in a repeatable way. Between the two solutions, we can now almost pitch to them, right, get your data into here, define what you want the actions off that data to look like. And that, yeah, very much is what in real world terms we now have. Not only have we got the sort of proven ability to do these things, albeit I'd like to be moving quicker, but hours, team, day. But at the same time, we can offer people a bit more of, a solution and demonstrable, and one that has proven worthy for us and worthwhile for us to invest that time up front to save all that time later. So that's kind of, a very long rambling answer to your question, but we can do stuff now that we couldn't do before. It's great.
Which is always is always a benefit, right? And
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
you were. I'm not sure if anybody has any follow-ups, but I think my follow-up is you kind of touching upon it, Luke, regarding about fatigue, and you talking about doing repeatable things, but also like saving time and like on the hours of doing these repeatable things.
Mm.
How do you measure success then? Are you following that? Are you tracking that? What does success look like for you if you're, potentially
If I cry
in
less
down
at the
at
end of the
fatigue?
week, I think it's better. That's
But
that.
how do you quantify
How do I find I catch the
that?
tears in a little petri dish and measure? No, what it is if so where we've had problems. So some of the things that we have done with this visibility. So do we feel like we have the information on hand? So we don't really do it against metrics. We do it kind of, am I going off and having to search for this again? Is one question. It's one question, Do I have to reinvent the wheel every time? If I'm not here, can someone else do it? That's sort of another great. Um, and I'm not saying that's not me. That's me. I'm not saying I'm great and everyone else is rubbish. I'm saying it's invariably with smaller teams and with everyone kind of gets right and bashed through this. I've got an idea of how that works. My colleague doesn't have to touch that then for 6 months, and you come back to it 6 months and go, well, actually, what did we do? Those kind of things. So, can we? Do we feel that we've got the processes captured in a specific way that's useful? Um, Kind of the other measures. I can't remember what you said you call it in times. I can't use the word I'm thinking for, but bad work, bad repeatable work.
Muck work, muck
That's the
work.
one, muck work.
Yeah.
Not the word I had come top of mind. Muck work, much friendlier for this kind of environment. Are we doing that? Are we weighed down in that? So are we just doing repeatable things day in, day out to stay afloat? So are we the ducks gliding along and our legs are doing this underneath? We don't want to be there. Can we sleep at night or do we lie awake worrying that something bad is going to happen? Is enough. Certainly, everyone's had incidents that have probably made them lose some sleep. It's nice to know that we feel a little bit more covered. And with the stack we've got, that we're not got our head in our head in the sand. So things are being logged. We've got alerts coming in. We're not ignoring them. We are working out ways to action them. So we're not just burnt out. And we have a seam. Yes, it's just a box in the corner that pings and the number goes up. No, we're actually trying to get to the bottom of those alerts. So do we have the time to triage through to conclusion the alerts? And do we take the lessons learned and roll them back into the whole cycle? Generally, how sane on a 1 to 10 are we? That's a good measure. Not very most of the time, but it's the sort of the measures for how the metrics for how we do it are that. Can someone else look at it? Can someone else understand it? Can we, if we have a problem with something, do we have the tooling to actually address it? Because I think that's a thing as well. You can see the problem, you can understand the solution, but that gulf in the middle, I mean, that's what people like us are paid for, right? So if we have solutions in place and we've bought security solutions, yet we still don't feel we're solving the security problem, that would be bad. I feel personally that with the stack we've got in place, we have the solution to the problems. We just need to use them to their full potential to engineer out those solutions and to address all the things that the four of us have talked about this afternoon. That's a good metric for me. Is it possible? Yes. So then the barrier is not a technological one. It's get me the time and we can fix these kind of thing. How do you get the time? Well, hopefully this is snowballing, right? The more time you get to fix one, two, three, the momentum grows and you've got more time then. If you're only dealing really with a few really scary alerts that defy automation,
Mhm.
or even if you're just on the roadmap to doing that, every time you knock off one of those rough edges, one of those use cases gets knocked out, you are hopefully enabling yourself to get more done, but also you're building a roadmap for others that you can show them in your organization. Say, look, this is how we can improve. How we as maybe a wide, I'm talking fairly infrastructure in a minute, but maybe how us as a wider IT team can approach these things. Automation isn't a new thing, but the simplicity and the sort of the data-driven approach to it now of having this large lake of information in Elastic and then having the ability of a solution like Tines, which is fairly intuitive for people to start to get to grips with if they can understand and use computers and drag, drop, done, and understand. It's not huge barriers to entry because the hard work of collecting all that information isn't on people to have to do. The hard work of understanding that information, well, once the examples are already built in a few things, people can use those to understand how to apply it for their things. So it's all those kind of things. They're all a bit floaty and feel good feelings metrics wise. But for me, I think if you're not hugely KPI driven, or if you're not hugely metrics, if you don't spend your time looking at charts of metrics and everything like that, they're the best takeaways you can get, frankly, is are these solutions helping me or are they hindering me, or worse, are we paying lots of money because someone says we need these solutions and they're not actually helping, so they're actually blocking me from getting other solutions which are useful.
Yeah, I think these are the metrics that make a lot of they empower your employees, right, to do the job, to make them more capable. And although, like you said, they may be wishy-washy, but at the end of the week, as long as you're not kind of staying up at night worrying about certain things, these are the metrics that make employees do their job better, make things more efficient. So yeah, I think they are worth this weight in gold. I'm just conscious of time to leave some time also at the end for some questions. Dave or Carl, do you have any thoughts on the conversation and kind of everything that Luke has shared? I think there's some really good points there and things that will be very relevant to other universities. But what are your kind of like takeaway thoughts or anything to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking that exact thing. Anyone watching this, I think, is going to take away quite a bit from what Luke's described. You've got really good lean operation, but it sounds really effective. And this is what a lot of the universities we're speaking to are struggling with, is how do you get that 24/7, 365 coverage, but with the limits in place, whether that's money or skills or whatever else. Some build an in-house SOC to cover all the hours. Some go out to managed service providers, and there are lots of different options. But I think it's about what can we provide as Elastic, as a software vendor, new tools in the stack to help give that efficiency, tech discovery, AI assistance, all this kind of good stuff. But then you layer on all the automation alongside. So you don't always have to have human beings in the loop, but you do. But how can you do as much as you can do with less? Going back to that saying from right at the start of the call, isn't it? Doing more with less. So yeah, really good insights. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing I'd say, I mean, Luke articulated brilliantly all the benefits that both our platforms together can deliver. So I guess what I would say is, we talked a little bit there about how you have feelings of whether you're meeting these objectives and so on, and KPIs, and you can almost flip that on its head as well, in that just because you're meeting all of your key indicators doesn't mean you have a happy team, right? You can be hitting all of those, but your team can be absolutely miserable. So I'm delighted to hear you say that, they're cool tools and anyone who can do basic IT can use them to achieve so much, because I guess together that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to give you tools that are easy to use, but that maximize the benefit for a small team like yours, who can scale to meet an ever increasing demand, right? So yeah, look, it is the do more with less. You're absolutely right. But hopefully they're tools that also put a bit of a smile on your face and make you almost look forward to using them to, as you said, think about the art of the possible. We see a lot of that in times. Users who, when they start using it, all of a sudden you can see the light bulb going off. Oh, I can use it for this. I can use it for that. I often say, I'm not sure if we're all old enough to remember it, but that game Minesweeper that used to be in Microsoft, it's like when you open one little box, all of a sudden all these other ones appear as well. So I think it's a little bit like that. But look, no, you did a great job articulating all of the benefits that we bring. So I'm glad to hear that they're actually being delivered.
Well, thank you all. I think just also another point to add. We know universities learn off each other, peer on peer, and kind of best practice and things like that. Not putting all your information out there, Luke, but if others want to, from the audience want to hear from you, what's the best way that they can get in to reach out, basically, to share that best practice?
Um, that's a good question, to be honest. I don't know actually. I avoid social media, and so email me probably. Which,
Yep.
if you're in academia, you'll be able to find my email address, I'm sure.
Amazing. And lastly, like one piece of advice, if anybody's wanting to deploy Elastic Times, what advice would you give them?
So just reach out to the guys because they've probably seen your use case before. But also don't feel that you have to have a fully formed use case for the everything. Certainly with security, it's even if you want to try to fix one pain point, see if you can fix that pain point as a start. Work from there. Just yeah, stay sane. If something's causing you misery, try and fix that one thing first, and then work on everything else.
Some wise words there.
Stay sane.
Um,
Very wise words indeed.
so I think what we'll do is we'll open up to questions. But yeah,